Today we're taking a closer look at the captain with heavy bolt rifle. Is he good? Is he bad? And how does he stack up against the competition? Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, the strategy focused 40k channel where we're all about getting the most out of our miniatures on the tabletop. In today's video we're focusing on the captain with heavy bolt rifle, the newest addition to a very extensive roster of Space Marine captains and leaders. In the video we'll talk over his data sheets and his notable points, talk about a couple of buffs and synergies that he specifically might be able to use, and discuss how he stacks up against his many competitors. So first of all, here is his datasheet. Our captain with mastercrafted heavy bolt rifle is power level 6 and 105 points to field in the game. I was honestly just a little bit surprised that he didn't wind up sharing the same datasheet as the Gravis captain. The two really are quite similar, to be honest, the only difference being swapping out that heavy bolt rifle for an auto boltstorm gauntlet. Definitely feels like they could have been consolidated, much like the standard Primaris captain. In terms of positives for him, he's 7 wounds and toughness 5, so he's one of the toughest Space Marine captains about. He's got a mastercrafted power sword, which is strength 5, AP 3 and damage 2. And of course that mastercrafted heavy bolt rifle, which is a 36-inch range rapid fire 1 weapon with strength 5, AP 2 and damage 2. Honestly, it's not too bad, and he will be splatting a few elite infantry from a long way across the board. But it is interesting to note that much like virtually every other captain, he's far stronger in assault than he is at shooting. At range you're going to be getting 2 attacks at strength 5 and AP 1, but in melee you're getting a whopping 6 attacks at strength 5 and AP 3. I wouldn't let the really big bolt gun distract you, he really is still a melee character. As for downsides, compared with the standard captain, he does have slower movement at movement 5 rather than 6. Gravis Armour will mean that he's a bit more restricted in terms of transports that he can get in, and unlike most of the other captains he has absolutely zero war gear flexibility. You can't take any variants of him, say if you wanted a power fist instead for example. Overall I think he's a bit of a solid all-rounder, a bit more shooting damage output than most captains. He can mix it up in combat well, and of course he's very tough. In terms of getting a bit more out of him on the tabletop, he will of course have access to all the things that standard captains can get, including the option to upgrade him to a chapter master if you want a bit better rerolls. You can always give him the Imperium sword for an extra attack, reroll charges and extra strength, and you could give him a warlord trait to allow him to bestow obsec on himself, which could be quite handy as he's such a tough character. A few things that I thought might be a bit more relevant to him is that if you wanted a bit more melee damage output you could think about the Burning Blade. That would get his strength up to 7 and AP to -5, which could be pretty relevant against some targets, and is very good with the Imperium sword as that could get his strength up to the very meaningful strength of 8. You could potentially think about giving him things like the Armoured Indomitus or the Adamantine Mantle to give him just a little bit of extra durability if he really wanted to go down that route. And he could potentially be a reasonable target for bearing some of the special relic bolts as well. Most chapters have their own, and some of them can be really quite useful, though they often mean sacrificing the actual damage output of the bolts to activate their special effect. He's kind of both a good target and a bad for this, as you really want them to have long range so you can put them just where you need them, but it's a bit rubbish to lose that really strong damage output, and it might well not be worth it. Of course there are many different options for making characters stronger throughout all of the many codexes. Just a couple of the ones that I thought might be more relevant for this guy though are White Scars advancing and charging. It's really not too bad on models with a slow movement, and it's better to have the melee damage output than the range damage if you have to choose between the two. You could make him a really stacked Salamanders character with using their durability options. They can have -1 to wound and also +2 toughness. You could get into the fairly silly situation where heavy bolters are only wounding him on 6s. Finally, another interesting option for him could be giving him a Space Wolves Frost weapon. That could get his mastercrafted power sword's damage output to 3 and its strength to 6, which is a very decent damage upgrade. I would say probably better than the Burning Blade on balance. Finally, being Primaris and Gravis does mean that he can use a few strats that some of the standard captains can't use. Transhuman Physiology is always a good reliable one if you just want him to really survive one turn. Gene-wrought might give him a bit of extra punch in close combat, though wouldn't usually be my first go-to unless I needed every single pip of damage output. And for one command point you could use Unyielding in the face of the foe, which is one that gives him +1 save against small arms fire. I guess it depends on what he's being shot with, but I suspect that Transhuman Physiology will be the best bang for your buck most of the time. So in general I think that this guy's usually going to be happiest if he's buffing a gun line, maybe one that's advancing slightly forward so he might have a chance to get into melee. It is quite nice to have a captain with some decent range damage output, as it means that he can contribute while he's still buffing other units that are shooting. To actually see some play in competitive lists though, he really does need to compete against the other many Space Marine captains, and there is stiff competition for the slots. The Indomitus captain isn't so far away from him, he costs exactly the same points, and is a little bit faster moving, gets a 2+ save from his relic shield, and a 4+ feel no pain against mortal wounds. For the trade-off, the bolt rifle captain gets 1 extra wound, 1 extra toughness, and a much better gun. Of the two, I do think he really competes quite decently, and that's quite encouraging to be honest, as the Indomitus captain is a fairly reasonable choice I think. We already mentioned his similarity to the Gravis captain before, who is 115 points, so 10 points more expensive. His main advantage is getting a power fist on the same body, which will make him a bit stronger in melee against higher strength targets, and can allow you to use some fun options such as mastercrafted weapons. I would say his gun's a bit worse though, and I'm just not sure that the extra 10 points is really worth it. He's better in combat, though I'm not sure he's significantly so. Other options include the Terminator captain, who does a very similar job to this guy except he can deep strike, so if deep strike is something that you want to do, then obviously take him. The bike captain, who is a little bit more expensive if you give him a power fist. He has 1 less wound and 1 less attack, but is very fast, very shooty, and has more options that you can give him if you want to give him some different gear. Getting an extra 9-inch movement really is quite significant. It'll allow him to get his buffs exactly where you need to, and jump out and strike at the enemy if it makes sense. Finally, if you are just thinking about sitting around and buffing a gun line, it might actually make sense not to pay for any other fancy equipment such as this guy has. You could put more points into your battle line units and just take a very cheap captain at 85 points, or perhaps even just drop down to a lieutenant at 70. If literally all you want is a reroll 1's aura, and the fightiness and toughness of the character doesn't matter at all because they're likely to be safe and not in combat, you really might think about the lieutenant over a captain. The Primaris one can be given a fancy bolt rifle to contribute at range as well. So there's no denying that this guy has absolutely tons of competition on all sides. I'd argue that he shapes up at least fairly well myself, and I think he's at least fairly well pointed in terms of the extra durability and range damage that you get over most of these other options. So I think he's a reasonable choice to take, but not necessarily going to be so good that people are going to flock to him. I think most lists will do pretty equally well with things like the Indomitus captain, the bike captain, or just a cheap captain or lieutenant. So let me know what you think of this guy down in the comments below. I am wondering when they're going to release him and the heavy intercessors. I was honestly expecting that they'd show up a bit earlier than this. If you've enjoyed the video, then feel free to check back for more Space Marine related tactics content, or subscribe to Auspex Tactics if you'd like to. Finally, if you have been enjoying my videos and would like to help support the channel, I would just like to mention that I do have a Patreon page, which you can find down in the video description below. Channel patrons get a few different advantages, such as voting on what sort of things come next on the channel, seeing new videos early, and automatic entry into the prize giveaway, where you have the chance to win some really big model kits at the start of each month, such as the start collecting boxes I'm giving away in December. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help support the channel, then the link is down in the video description below. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.